Welcome to Leaders Among Us with Shawn Stroud.
We are so excited today to welcome Alexa Johnson.
Hi.
Alexa, we're so glad. Alexa is the Executive Director for Housing and Resource Center of Monterey County, where she's been at that in that capacity since 2017.
Mm-hmm.
And Alexa, what a joy to have you join us on our leadership podcast. Thank you for being here this morning.
Thank you. I'm very excited.
Yeah. Well, Alexa, in case someone doesn't know you, I'll just kind of share a little bit about your story. We'd just love to hear your story, kind of, where you're from and what brought you to Monterey and kind of where did you land? How did you decide to serve in the career that you're in right now?
Woo, that is so many big stories all wrapped into one. I moved here in 2009, where I met my husband. I actually met my husband here at Shoreline in the college group, and we went to school. After we finished school, we loved it here and we decided to stay. And so Shoreline had been our home. We started continuing in our careers. I decided to continue my education, and I was actually going to go into the education realm. I really wanted to look at how the education system really affects migrant students, and I was kind of going a whole different route. And I actually grew up where I don't think it was necessarily verbally told, it was kind of underlying, but I was always kind of told to not talk to people who were homeless. We'd be in the car driving and there'd be people with signs, and like we just wouldn't look at those people like they didn't exist. And I never thought I would go in the homeless realm, that homeless sector. And God never had any doors open to what I thought my career would be. And all these doors had opened to homeless nonprofits and the nonprofit world. And so I was like, okay, I'll apply there and I'll just get my feet wet. I won't spend too much time there. And years later, now I'm the executive director for this housing nonprofit. And I can totally see how God used that whole timeline to really shape me and to get me in the position I am now, and just helping those who are homeless and need guidance on how to get stable again. So my husband and I live here. We have a son, we have 2 dogs, we live in Marina, and we just really enjoy living on the coast. We love Monterey. It's our home.
Yeah. Well, Alexa, I really want to dive deeper into that, into your role as the executive director, but I'd like to kind of take a journey back and just kind of take you back. You studied cultural anthropology.
I did.
No, that's a very unique study.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit more about that. What is cultural anthropology? And obviously you were drawn to that sort of educational background, but obviously the Lord used that background, that education, to really help shape you into the person you are today, and contribute to the way you're leading your team over there at the Resource Center. So, tell us more about cultural anthropology. What is it?
Oh man, how much time do we have? So, cultural anthropology looks at present day cultures and uses the knowledge of these cultures to understand certain behaviorisms and why people eat, sleep, drink, wear the clothes they wear, why do they speak the way they speak, why do they behave the way they behave, and trying to just better understand people. And so I went into cultural anthropology with the lens of loving cultures and wanting to learn diversity. And I went to school for applied anthropology for my master's that really looks at how do you apply anthropology in a workplace setting. And so it could be nonprofit work or museums, forestry. A lot of forest rangers now are coming up with applied anthropology backgrounds. How are humans affecting the forests and causing deforestation? So there's just different ways that anthropology is now being applied, marketing. And so the further I got into anthropology, the more I realized there's a lot that I can learn from this and take from this. It teaches you a lot about statistics and the surveys and how to do all the data that you need to collect in order to show nonprofits this is our progress, this is how we're doing.
Right.
And so it just was a natural transition for me with anthropology into the nonprofit world.
Yeah, I think the first time I ever heard that phrase, the term cultural anthropology, was in around 2005, and I was stationed at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. And back then, they were really just starting to dive in and explore that. I was on active duty in the military, and they were exploring what cultural anthropology, what it was, but also how you could look at that to really better understand the people and especially in warfare. And at that time, that was the Iraq War. So when I deployed in 2006, interestingly, we had a group of people that were trained as cultural anthropologists that were part of our team in Iraq, and they were called human terrain teams.
Yeah.
And they did some of the most fascinating work. It's sort of an unwritten story. I've never really read any stories about it from the Iraq War. But what they did was they worked especially out in areas and remote areas, really getting to know the villagers, getting to know their culture, getting to know their traditions. And in one particular case, I remember in 2006, there was, at that time, Al-Qaeda in Iraq was really, really dangerous. Yeah. And what was happening out in Anbar province, one of the provinces in Iraq, is Al-Qaeda was coming in and they were going into villages and they were recruiting the sons of the villagers. And so they would whisk them off and then they would become suicide bombers. And it was just tragic when I learned about this. But what the cultural anthropologists taught us was that we all thought that in a home in Iraq, because of the mostly Islamic families had that, most of them were Muslims, we were told that the father was really the one that was sort of the authority within the house. But what we realized through our cultural anthropologists, they said, hey, the real influence within the household, behind closed doors, it's the mothers. And what we realized was that if we had any hope at all in stopping Al-Qaeda from recruiting these young boys, these young men, we had to be able to connect with the mothers. And so these human terrain teams, these cultural anthropologists, they went out and they just built relationships with the mothers throughout these villages. And then in 2006, 2007, there's this called the Anbar Awakening. And it's fascinating when we look at the number of Al-Qaeda recruiters that were eliminated in that whole season because of the mothers said, not in my house, you're not recruiting my son. But it all started from cultural anthropologists and their knowledge of the trade. So when I knew that was your background, I was like, oh, Alexa, I just love that because most people don't know. So tell me more about that.
Yeah, it's a great tool to just learn how to have people skills and to be able to understand that there's more cultures out there than just your own. Yeah. And especially when you are trying to do things, resolve conflict or in my case, trying to end homelessness, you have to stop and actually understand the people that you're trying to serve, how they live their life. Yeah. And you can't just assume that based off of your own knowledge and how you grew up, that you can just impart that on somebody else and it's going to make a situation better. Yeah. It doesn't always work that way. Yeah. And so when you kind of stop and just take a breather and realize there's other people that think in different ways, you're able to communicate and resolve. I mean, I bet there's a lot of folks in your scenario that probably didn't even understand each other linguistically. Exactly. But they're able to come to some form of a resolution because the idea of loving your child and a mother's bond with their child is something that you could relate to. Yeah. And that's beautiful. Yeah. And I just think, too, what you just described, I think about Jesus, is just like the perfect example of where he met people where they were at. He knew everything about them, but yet he still... He wanted them to share their story. He wanted to learn. He wanted to know more about that. And I think for us, just understanding the value that every human being has, the dignity, and then being willing to just engage in a conversation and not have these presuppositions or, predispositions on people and actually just come in with an open, fresh mind, but also being aware and receptive to learning more about the person. So, and even Jesus meeting people where they're at, it's not necessarily meaning he agrees with their lifestyle either. Yeah. And I think even some of the green anthropology students come in and they think, oh, you have to agree with everything. And it's like, the most seasoned anthropologist would say you have to have a marker. Yes. And that's your own, your morals, your way of life. You have to have something that gauges your starting point. And it's more to understand them and know how to speak to other cultures, not necessarily adopting everybody's way of life. You'll have no identity at that point. Exactly right. And I always kind of look at it this way. We're all human. And so therefore we have at least one place we can start in common ground, and we can work out from there. But I love that idea that, we don't have to agree with everything, but we can still show someone dignity and show them respect and show them value and learn more about them, which is wonderful. So that was your education, which clearly the Lord used that to really help shape you and help really move you
into this career that you're in now. So this really, the focus for this episode we're really looking at is this idea of adaptive leadership, how really great leaders have to be adaptive, because we can't come in and just have once, our mind can't just be on this way, this is the way we've always done it. We have to be able to adapt. When you think about that phrase, adaptive leadership, Alexa, in your education and now in your career, how have you seen you grow in that? Do you see that as a strength that you brought to the table from maybe your education and your life experiences as well?
I do. I think partially my faith and partially with an anthropological background, I have come together to have this idea that leadership really is not just leading a group of followers, that you're a leader with a capital L, but you're trying to have other lowercase leaders that you're trying to bring up. And you're trying to show their strengths. The tongue can be used to build people up or to destroy. And so you really want to use that in a way to build people up. And some people might be really great at public speaking, and some people might be really great at helping individuals in a crisis. And to me, adaptive leadership is understanding that you don't have all of the answers. And every day is an opportunity to learn, to grow. And that doesn't mean just you to the people that you're leading. It means for yourself as well. Yeah. I tell my staff all the time, I'm going to be writing up policies and procedures and all these structures for these programs. But if you look at it and you say, that's not going to work, I'm going to listen to you and ask you why. I'm not going to say, well, I'm the boss and I wrote this based off of my 0 hours that I've had out in the internment camps, in the homeless camps.
We'll clarify that. Yeah, no worries.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to, with my 0 hours in Chinatown, my 0 hours in the homeless camps, I'm not going to then write policies and procedures and then say, you have to follow these to the T.
Yeah.
And so they'll say, you know what, that's not going to work, because honestly, we have a lot of single moms or a lot of individuals who are 8 months pregnant that we can't tell them they have to go get a job.
Right.
That's not going to be realistic for them. We need to have another option. Can we change the wording instead of they need to get a job to they need to increase their income? And that can mean different things. And so, you listen and you take in what your staff is saying, because they're the ones on the ground floor doing that work, not you. And I think for me, that's how I take on adaptive leadership, is understanding that I have people on my team that are 65 that have done this for years.
Oh, yeah.
They have way more knowledge than I do.
Yeah.
And then we have people who are brand new coming in, and I've got more knowledge than them. So we really work together in that aspect. And I really want, the individual that's been doing this for 30 years. Well, I don't really know how to speak up about this when we have our funders meeting. I don't know how to talk about this. Okay, you've been talking to this person for how many hours? You've been doing this? So say that, and we'll back you up. That makes sense. This case, you go out there and you do that. And I think over time, you start building up staff that are not just your staff, the followers, as you're leading them all. Yeah. They become their own individual leaders. And then when they talk to their clients, they're saying, okay, well, this is what we're going to do. And this is going to be the best course of action. And then they come to our office and they say, Alexa, I think we need to pay for A, B, and C. This person has a plan. They don't have money now, but they're going to have money in 3 months. And they are starting to take control over their position.
Yeah.
And I really like seeing that, because when we're able to build people up, they're able to grow and develop versus just being, stagnant and you're leading them. I mean, even Jesus says, go out and make disciples.
Yeah.
And he doesn't say, come back tomorrow and I'm going to give another lesson.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? He's saying go out and be leaders and take charge.
Yeah.
And I think that's what it means to be a leader, and to be adaptive and understand that today how you were a leader might not be how you're going to be a leader tomorrow.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
And there's going to be some days where you're kind of a crummy leader, and you might have to do some self-reflection and start over tomorrow.
Yeah. And so as you were sharing, the big things I took away is the idea of humility.
Yeah.
And really, like you just described, just from a humble perspective of, as an executive level leader, it's so easy to fall into the trap of, do as I say, and just don't ask questions. But a great leader, an adaptive leader, and a humble leader, like you've described, is someone who really appreciates the experience that others bring, appreciates the voice that they bring,
right.
appreciates the wisdom that they can bring, and then and then really invites. That's the other piece. That humility is also, hey, tell me if I'm missing anything, or tell me if there's anything you see that's not right in this, because hey, we're in this together. And your leaders must really just love working for you, Alexa, because that.
I hope so.
Right? No,
I hope so.
But that's really the humility, but also the empowerment. I mean, I believe every person wants to be valued, and they want to know that they're also valuable to the team, right? And so you've articulated that, so that's wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I tell them, if I say, you know what, I appreciate that, but we're going to stick to this, you just say, okay, and you keep going, right? Or if it's, no, I really don't think it's going to work out. Well, I don't want to write something up and all of you not follow it because it doesn't work. Like, how ineffective is that?
Yeah, we've all do that, right?
Yeah.
Because the boss said so, and then we just kind of go, oh, follow along. Yeah.
So.
Well, and also was really interesting was you shared a little bit about, Jesus, when Jesus, his final words before he ascended to heaven, go and make disciples. And before that, Jesus says, all authority has been granted to me. All authority has been given to me. Now you go. And so he was sending them out in authority, with authority, but also empowering them, to go. And then we know that, the Holy Spirit comes. And so now people know when a leader empowers them, there's implicit trust that leader has. And so talk about trust a little bit with your team. How have you seen that trust grow, Alexa, both for you, for your team, as you've served in your leadership role, but also your team for you as well? Kind of share some insights on that. We'd love to hear any particular stories as you've grown in your role.
When I first came to Housing Resource Center, not even in a leadership role yet, there was a lot of distrust between management and staff for many reasons. And, it came to the point where it was like, are you actually going to go visit this person that's homeless, or are you doing something else? So as I got into the role, we started, developing relationships. If people couldn't understand my standards, they either left or I asked them to leave, and we replaced those individuals. And I think the staff that wanted to be there really appreciated that. It was kind of like, you may have hired somebody and it didn't work out, but you got rid of them and you got somebody else. And that makes me feel like you really do want to hold us up to a higher standard. And that was, I think, something they really appreciated. And then over time we have Google calendars that they use, and I say, I don't want to micromanage. I just want to know, if you don't show back up at the office, where were you? When your husband or your wife or your children say, where are they? I don't want to be like, I don't know. So I said, just put on your calendar where you are and the address of where you're going, not to micromanage. I don't want to try to corral stray cats. I'm just wanting to know that you guys are safe. And as long as you're meeting standards, I trust you to manage your schedule how it needs to be. If you need to go to King City and be there all day, and I see you from 8 to 8:30 and 4:30 to 5 because you were gone, I'm not going to say, why were you gone? I'm going to trust that you were down there because you were meeting, 6 clients at once, or you were negotiating with landlords. You're professionals. Unless there's a dip in your performance, I'm not going to manage you so closely. And I think they appreciate that because they're allowed to make their schedule as needed. And it's funny because even so, they'll say, is it okay if I take an extra 30-minute lunch? And the reality is I would never know. I would never know if they were gone for an hour and a half. But they'll tell me, is it okay if I take an extra 30-minute lunch, or is it okay if I leave 30 minutes early? And so that conversation is always still there. And so, I feel like there's a really good level of trust that I can have in them. They feel like she's putting a lot of trust in me. I have to make sure that I do her proud. And then even for me, I hear all the time people say, you're the executive director. If you want to show up late to work, show up late. Who are they going to complain to? Or if you want to do this, do that. What are they going to say? And it's like, well, I could. And they couldn't say anything. They couldn't do anything. But to me, it's like, well, what kind of example does that set? If I'm saying give it your all and I'm giving 50% and I'm getting paid more than you. What is that going to say? And so if I'm sick, I put sick time. If I'm on vacation, I put vacation time. I don't say I'm going out to a meeting and I'm, in Monterey at Alta Bakery. That's my favorite. That's my go-to.
Exactly.
It came a little too easily.
There you go.
Shameless plug. But, it's really important for them to know that I'm doing my part. And I will tell them, hey, I'm going to be doing, from this time to this time, I'm doing contract negotiations for this. Like, my door is going to be closed. I need you to respect that. That's really important. And I tell them, and I've even had some people say, like, you don't need to be telling them all of that. It's nothing they need to worry about. Well, I want them to know that when they say to me all the time, like, why don't we have this? Why don't we have that? That I really am up to bat for them. I really am trying to get things done. And so there's a lot of people on both sides being like, as executive director, you don't need to justify your work. You don't need to tell them what you're doing. But I'm like, I'd rather them know that I'm putting in my share.
Absolutely.
And I'm doing my part, and I'm setting the standard that I expect them to follow. And so that's really important to me. And some days I think I hit the mark great, and some days I probably don't. But even then, I think there is a lot of grace, too, that we have for one another. If someone is sick, we say, how can we help you with your cases? If someone is out for a long period of time, what can we do to help? Someone's having a baby, we throw baby showers. It's always like trying to help one another balance things. And I think that's really nice. You spend so much time at work, it might as well be in a good, healthy environment.
Yeah. And that's exactly kind of what I'm hearing, is that a healthy work environment is a healthy work where there's trust. There's trust, and you establish that trust over time, and it's built as you lead,
right,
and you set the example in everything from, if you say you're going to be there at 9 o'clock in the morning, you're there at 9 o'clock in the morning. So you're a person of your word, and they see that. And then I love this idea of the Google calendaring. We do that as well here at Shoreline Church with our staff. And we really believe, like you just said, it's really, accountability is really about caring. It's about knowing where your people are. It's about caring about your people, so that if somebody doesn't show up to work, and you don't have any form of calendaring or any sort of rhythm within your staff, or a procedure within your staff that says, hey, I'm going to regularly account for my hours, how do you know where they're at? And the other piece, I think, too, is that the calendaring really helps it make easy for availability. So if Alexa, you say, hey, we need to do a quick ad hoc meeting, we didn't have a plan, but boy, there's this big opportunity that came up, we really got to pull the team together. It's really nice to know where people are at, because then you can say, okay, well, what time will work today? Well, maybe not today. But if you have no calendar, you don't really have that ability to do that. So it makes it especially helpful, I think, for the administrative side of the team, right, to be able to schedule meetings and make sure people are available for those meetings. So I love to hear you're doing that too. We love that here. Whether we use Google, we use Google Calendar here at Shoreline as well, and our staff.
I'm using it constantly.
Yes, yeah, and
constantly,
and it keeps me on track. I don't know what I would do. I
my to-do list.
Exactly. Yeah.
All the way down.
Yeah. And as a leader, and I love also how you described there's times when you really need some deep brain time, some deep thinking, and you've really got, hey, I got to do this procedure. I've got to do this policy. It's going to take a lot. I've got to be able to write up this. And there's times when you do have to, close the door, and you got to pull the shade, and you got to do the work. And the fact that your team understands that, you clearly communicate to them, that's important. A leader needs those times, don't they? They need times to really kind of pull away, to really focus, do that. We call it deep work. You really be able to do that deep thinking and really be able to apply that. So
yeah. And someone said to me a long time ago, and I think they were saying it more in a joking way, but it's still something that sticks in the back of my brain, and I don't really know what to do with that information. It just sits there.
Yeah.
But in the nonprofit world, you're constantly trying to give 100% of your time to everything. And someone said, well, there's only one savior. Like, you can't save it all. And I'm like, yes, there is one savior. And so you are limited to what you can do, but you want to do everything that you personally can do, because you're like, I'm so passionate, and this is what God wants me to do. And I'm going to be the hardest worker in this room. Yeah. And so everybody, even management across all nonprofits, they'll talk about how they leave their door open, because if an emergency happens, they have to be there to support. But it's like, yes, but you also have to look at your data, and you have to compile your data and write reports and send it to the county and do your state reporting. And if this stuff doesn't happen, you lose your funding. And then what happens to the 19 people that you're employing? Yeah. So you have to let them know, I need this time. Yeah. If it's an emergency, come to me. So we have housing navigators, and we have case managers. So I have a head case manager and a head housing navigator.
Okay.
And so I said, if they can't answer the questions, they can come. They can come and talk to us.
Yes.
But if it's a, how do I do this in the database? How does this happen? This is an emergency. What should I do? Talk to them first. And they can come to me. I don't need 19 people coming to me.
Right. Yeah.
That's too much.
Yeah, exactly. Way too much.
Yeah.
And I think that's another way you build that trust is you are empowering those two leaders to really be the go-between. And if it's something they don't know the answer to, or they don't have the experience to, or maybe they just say, "Hey, Alexa, I want to get another perspective."
I'm afraid to give an answer to it.
Yeah. That just really empowers them because now their people aren't running around them to get to you. Those people are going through them. And then as a team, they're bringing that to you.
Right.
What would you say to the leader that maybe a junior leader that's not had that experience yet? Maybe they've supervised one or two people and maybe, they've now elevated to a position of greater authority where now those one or two people have become 13 or 14 people.
Right.
What would you say to them about sort of adapting their leadership style before maybe they allowed their 2 or 3 employees to come to them on a regular basis? Now they've got to put something like that. What would you say to that young leader that maybe's been elevated up in a similar, not a similar role to you, but in a greater capacity?
Yeah. Some people I think might have these skills just naturally, and some people have to actually learn it over time. So I take a more of a logical approach to kind of meet in the middle. But I think it would be really important when you are in a position of higher authority to take a minute to know your staff, know what interests them. Sometimes I do icebreaker questions to know, like, what would you do on vacation, or where would you want to go, or what's your favorite food? So that way I can get ideas in my head for anything in the future.
Okay.
But know your staff, know their strategies for, meeting company goals, know their strong suits, know things that they need to work on. Sometimes even knowing which people are just saying what you want to hear. You kind of have to know your staff and kind of get a good feeling because you want to be able to then, especially in a new role, you're not going to know your new role right away. Right. So what do you think about, this marketing strategy and what would you do for it? Oh, interesting. And then you can take your knowledge and what you've learned that's put you in this position in the first place, but also tap into your staff and what they know. They in some way, shape, or form have been in this field in a different capacity, longer than you have. So take a minute to listen. I think leaders are so quick to try to act and how are things done, and let's try to change things. And it really should be, let's look at the staff, let's look how they run things. How can you put yourself in there? And of course you have the authority to make changes, right? But make changes that are going to support the entire group, not just, I want to make these changes now and get things up and running.
Right, exactly.
So I think that would be my advice, is to just really listen to your staff, learn them, learn their skills, learn what they need to work on, and be able to figure out how does that going to work in my new, kind of group that I'm working with.
Yeah, I love it. Learn who your people are and listen. Take the time to truly listen. And I mean, I can imagine when you first got in your role, those were probably some pretty fun staff meetings where you'd, hey, here's our icebreaker. But what's amazing, and I've seen this happen even here at Shoreline, when you have a new leader come in and they take a genuine interest in people.
Right.
And when people begin to share, coworkers, people that have worked like side by side are like, I didn't know that. I didn't know you had a dog named, whatever. I didn't know you even liked dogs. I thought you were a cat person. It's amazing how when we take time to learn and listen to people, how that really elevates the cohesiveness of a team and recognizes the value again of every member on that team. So I just love that.
Absolutely.
Alexa.
We have a staff member I just found out like 6 months ago that she has kind of a side bakery business, and she makes the most beautiful cakes, and she'll dip strawberries and she does all these designs on them. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like your skill set goes way beyond just housing navigation or being a mom or, like you have like this hobby, that's passion that you really love. And I'm like, do you want to one day own your own bakery? Like that would be really fun.
Yeah.
And, you get to learn people's passion. And with that, too, it's like, oh, she's a baker. So she's patient. She pays attention to those details, and you start kind of putting things together, and you're like, oh, that makes sense. Why you are so good at what you do.
That goes back to your cultural anthropology, right? Really going,
Yeah.
It's fun because, it's sort of like putting the pieces of the puzzle together. And you're like, now I know what motivates you. I know what, you're passionate about.
Right.
I can see it. And then also that allows you to lead them. It allows, so, and I was just thinking about, you said, someone who's a baker in particular, they really do have to pay attention to details. And so you go, yeah, she's really good at that. But maybe another staff member struggles in that area of paying attention to details. And so you're getting ready to do a report that's got data and it's got to go to the county or whatever. And you'd be able to partner and say, hey, why don't you have so-and-so who has a really strong gifting and attention to details, could you have her review it with you just for a second set of eyes? And knowing that, I think, really allows your team to grow stronger. Yeah, it's a wonderful example.
And work together.
There you go. It's collaboration. Exactly. So, Alexa, we've talked a little bit about, kind of the leadership within your organization. So as every leader knows, there's challenges. So thinking about your role now in the executive level, the executive director role that you're in, candidly, what are some of the challenges that kind of your team faces, your organization faces, and just, whatever you're comfortable sharing with us, we'd love just to kind of know more about that and then to learn more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things the public would be surprised about is we struggle with unrestricted funding, meaning we get a lot of funding that people will say we want it to specifically serve the community. We want it to go out into the community. Okay. But when you have needs, you need to pay to keep the lights on. You need to pay for HR. You need to pay for training. You need to pay for vehicles for people to drive individuals to these meetings. Yeah. And those aren't always things that are covered in your contracts. So that's always something that is a continual struggle for all nonprofits, mine included. But then also looking at the community itself, the housing inventory that's available, the prices for rent is very, very high.
Yeah.
Very high. And there's a lot of homes that, some homes are beautiful and they're perfect.
Yeah.
And there's some homes that just are not in really good condition. And so it's like, how can you move somebody into this unit and have them pay $2,000, which is 60% of their income.
Right.
So there's just a struggle in finding affordable housing. There's a struggle in having enough mental health services for a lot of folks that are in the community. Okay. It's difficult for us to put people in housing when they also have additional needs that need to be met that could potentially prevent them from being able to live independently on their own.
Right.
And so, we're there for a short time. We put you in housing, we temporarily will pay your rent, and then we leave. But what happens to you after we leave? Who's going to help you? It's got to be
sustainable. Yeah.
So there's a lot of struggle in just having those additional supportive services. It could be looked at as a non-housing service, but I would argue that all these services are needed in order to be stable.
Exactly. Yeah.
So being able to show up to your job on time, or to get a job, or to keep your place clean. If you're used to living in a tent for years in Chinatown, for example, it's going to be difficult for you then to go into a studio and unpack all of your things and learn how to keep things clean and sleep in a bed.
Yeah.
Those things, it takes a long time to really unravel. For someone, it's a mental game as much as it is, an economic or a housing issue.
Yeah, and it's a whole, like you're describing. It really is a holistic approach. We can't just, it's not a Band-Aid. You can't just go, okay, hey, let's find them a place to live and we'll pay their rent for 2 or 3 months and then they'll be great, because you're also dealing in many cases with there's the mental illness challenges. There's also, in many cases, I know, especially for some of our single moms, that they're dealing, maybe coming out of an abusive relationship. And I know that there's all these different challenges that you have to take into account and then try to be able to meet the needs of that individual so that they can be really helped, but also they can live independently and live,
Right.
just the life that, God would really desire for them to live. Alexa, I know we've talked about the challenges, but I know you can't give specifics, but share with us a couple of like success stories. Like when somebody says, Alexa, what really motivates you to continue doing? Because you're working it hard. This is
Right.
really difficult. And the Lord has brought you in that. He's equipped you. He's given you the education, the passion, and the joy to do that. What are some of those like couple of success stories that you really just cherish and go, I cling to those on those hard days, when it's really hard to go, I just remember, this story. So, and any of those, and you don't have to feel free. Now, we know that you want to, respect privacy, but we'd love to hear a couple of those stories.
Yeah, the few that come to my mind, there was a senior woman who was having a really difficult time in her housing and really was just being taken advantage of for her situation. And she really didn't qualify for any of our programs for rent assistance, but we were able to at least coach her through, okay, how do we get you out of this place? Let's take pictures of the space you were in so they can't say you made any additional damages. Let's try to move you into the shelter. Let's try to get you some of these resources. Eventually, she was able to find housing, but she couldn't afford to move in. So she called me and said, well, what do I do? And what I constantly am trying to impart in my staff and in the community is, even if we are not the resource center for you, like you can't enroll in our program, we want to be a housing resource. So come to us. If it doesn't work, whatever resources we give you, come back. So I said, let me look into some resources that are out there. During that time, we had a program in our community called Emergency Rental Assistance. And through that program, she was able to get some move-in costs to move in. She's still in her unit. She sends me thank you cards constantly. She bought Miles a baby shower gift.
Oh my goodness.
And it was just a sweet book. And I read it all the time. And it's just like this book of like empowerment messages to like give to children.
Yeah.
And whenever she's a big housing advocate now, so she'll say, I don't know if you saw this going on, but you should definitely attend. And so she's constantly like connecting me. She connected me to the townhouse meeting that was in Carmel yesterday for affordable housing opportunities. I didn't even know that was happening.
Oh my goodness.
And she said, I told them HRC needed to come. Here's the information. So it's like
she's become a champion, right? Yeah.
She has. And so it's been really great that, and she'll constantly end her emails with, I might not be feeling that great, but I'm truly blessed. I have my own place, that level of contentment.
Yeah.
And so that is one of my success stories that I still have a really good relationship with her now.
Yeah.
And another one, I have it in my office. Usually we ask individuals who complete our program if they'll do a success story.
Okay.
And this individual is also a senior, actually. She was taking care of her grandchildren, and her granddaughter had lost custody of her children. So she had taken these children in because she loves them and she wanted to take care of them, but she didn't have housing. So they were staying in different areas and different churches and different places. And her therapist had told her, take this piece of paper, fold it in half, and draw on the left side where you're living and the emotions that you feel. So she drew some choir room, and she said worry, anger, and fear. And on the right side, she drew a 2-story house with a backyard for her dogs with sunshine. And so
where you want to be, right? Where you want to be,
and so when she had finished her program, she handed that paper to me, and she said, I'm not good with writing. I don't want to take a success photo. I don't want to write a story, but this is my success story to you. And I have it framed in my office because we put her in a 2-story home with a backyard in South County, so there's tons of sunshine.
Yeah.
And her grandkids got to live there. They got to graduate. They went off to college. She had a housing authority voucher, so she was able to downsize to a smaller unit, and she stayed housed.
Wow.
And so I have that up on my wall because it's where she was and where she wanted to be. And it just, to me, like, was just such a pretty visual of what it is that we want to do. And amongst all of the sadness and the tragedies that you hear and all the trauma that you try not to absorb, when you hear those good stories,
Yeah.
you're like, that's why we do it. Like,
Yeah.
that's why
Yep.
it does happen. It does work.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, if 50 people fail, but you get 25 people to stay permanently housed, you've succeeded.
Yeah. Yeah. You changed their lives.
Yeah.
And yeah.
So it's a really good feeling, and
Yeah.
it's nice to know that you can make some sort of positive impact. Some people, they never really realize the impact that they make in someone's life, or who they've touched.
Yeah.
And so it's nice when you get to visually see it.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. My wife is a school teacher, and so she just recently moved from. She was at elementary school, so she was teaching 5th grade, and now this year she moved to 6th grade. So now she's moved from elementary, teaching all the subjects, and now she's teaching just math, which she loves math. She loves that. And last night was back to school night for the parents. And so she came home. She was so overjoyed because many of these parents their children were 1st graders when she also taught 1st grade. Then she taught 2nd grade during COVID. And just that great reminder that these children, the impact that she had on these children in a positive way, and that their parents, they were so excited to know that Mrs. Stroud has now moved into 6th grade. So their child gets said Mrs. Stroud. So she came home, and I told her, I said, honey, you got to just cling to those. That's, those long days of teaching, those hard days of teachings, when your lesson plan doesn't go, you look back on those moments and those success stories and just cherish those memories, and just remind yourself that, you are making a positive impact.
Yeah, absolutely. Right? I mean, I could tell you right now, you could tell your wife, I remember 5th grade, I was getting B minuses and C minuses and not great grades. And I remember my teacher saying, you see this, we're going to change it this year.
Oh,
we're going to make these A's and B's. And from 5th grade on, I've had, I had almost all A's and a few B's here and there, but I really didn't have anything lower than that. And I think about that all the time, and I'm like, gosh, I wish I could see him and just say, like, we did it, and like, because of that, like, you had good grades, you went to college because you had good grades, that small piece of confidence really did grow. And I totally contributed to him.
I'll make sure I let Amy know that, because I look back, and I think we've had teachers like that that have made an impact on our life. They've been such a positive role model in our life, and they changed really, like, the trajectory of our education, of our educational experience, where before maybe we didn't really want to come to school, or we weren't motivated to come to school, weren't motivated to excel in the classroom, and one teacher can change that. And just a great reminder. So, Alexa, now I'm going to shift gears.
Okay.
We talked about your role as an executive director. We've talked about different leadership dynamics in that. So 2 years ago, you became a mom. And you and Mark, your husband, welcomed little Miles into your home. So
yes,
talk about how you have had to adapt your leadership now that you're also a mommy. And, think about that. How, because that's obviously for a lot of women, that's a significant shift when they've been leading, they've been working outside the home, and then they decide it's time to have a baby, and now you've got that additional bundle of joy in your life. But it comes with its own challenges. So Sharon, we'd love to hear just a little bit. How have you adapted your leadership now that you're a mother?
I laugh when I think about how I never realized this tiny little human could change your whole life and everything that you do.
Yep.
This kid can't even eat by himself, make his own food, and yet he's changed our whole lives and everything we do and why we do it. It's very challenging to be a leader, let alone adapting your leadership once you become a parent. You're trying to balance and be present as a wife, as a mom, and also knowing that you have an agency that also oversees a really big mission in the community. And so there's been a lot of prayer and reflection, and God, is this still what you want me to do? And my family, we've always kind of had this idea. I don't think they've ever worded it this way, but this is how I've taken it and how I plan on telling Miles. Like, the more blessings the Lord gives you, the more responsibility you have to share it. And whether that's money, whether that's education, whatever it is, you have to share it. It's not for you to just keep for yourself. And so I was constantly reflecting on it. Like, is this am I supposed to continue this line of work? Do I need to change my line of work? And there's days where I kind of think I want to change this work because it's too stressful, but then good things happen, like those success stories, and I'm like, this is why I do it. And so God has had me, you have a mission still. I still want you here. I still want you doing this work. I have always grown up with different people who were able to pour into me and watch me while my mom went to work. I remember thinking how, both my parents were working parents and how hard they worked. And so I was like, yeah, I want Miles to know that like his mom and dad are out there and they are continuing their hard work and trying to help those individuals that need that support. And, the new thing that I'm trying to develop now that I'm not perfect at is trying to figure out how to have that proper balance. Miles is now old enough. He wants to run around. He wants to do things. He wants to spend time with us. He makes it kind of vocal and known when it's like, hey, no, Mom, I want you. Like, I want to be with you. And so trying to figure out the proper balance. And sometimes that is telling work, like, no, I can't do that. I need to go home. If I don't do that, I won't see Miles for this whole day. He needs to at least see me for a couple hours. Like, and having to learn that no is a full sentence. And so you could say to, city officials or mayors or any sort of outside group that says you need to do this and you need to be involved in this and you need to, well, how much of a time commitment is this outside of my normal stuff? I don't think I'll be able to do that. I can't commit to that because I have a young son and I have a husband. I can't have him take, the load for both of us. And I think that's part of being a leader too, is knowing your limits, knowing what you can't and can't do, and saying no. And once I heard no as a full sentence too, I'm a person who loves sayings.
That's a great saying.
I have so many sayings, it's ridiculous. But no as a full sentence has been something the past year that I've really, it's okay to say no. And what's not okay is to commit to something that you can't make the time for. So adapting really is just, in my case, figuring out what's the appropriate amount of attention and time that I need to spend at home, what needs to be done at work. And if there's a weird overlap, that's where God comes in. And I say, like, how do I prioritize this? Can I give some additional tasks to my staff? Is this an opportunity for them to grow? Like, what can I do to distribute this? Because home life is important and you need to keep that balance. And I've got a great village that pours into Miles and loves him.
Oh, good.
He goes to a wonderful daycare that he gets excited. He actually gets sad when I take him home. So it's a good place. So he's always playing and having a great time. And so I'm very blessed that I can trust somebody else to watch. And I even let her know, like, because you do this, like, there's people who are doctors that are parents here. They get to go and they get to help people that are in need. I get to go and do my work. Like, you doing this is impacting so many other things. And so,
I love that when you talk, about just knowing your limitations. And then obviously as the more you lead and the longer you lead, you recognize your own limitations. I think that's part of maturing as a leader. And then I love that saying. I'd never heard that before, that no is, is a sentence, it's a full sentence. Pastor Kevin wrote a book called No is a Beautiful Word. So and one of the big lessons there was that he shared was for every yes, there's a no. So when as a leader, when somebody comes and asks us, hey, do you want to do this? Or hey, I need you to do this. You got to recognize when you say yes, you're saying no to something else. And I love, Alexa, how you have, through just experience, but also clarity that God's brought, is, hey, for me to say yes to this, I need to know what's the expectation. I need to know what's the time, how much time is this going to take before I can even consider it. That's what I've got to know. I think, unfortunately, a lot of people will say yes without considering the consequences or the expectations or the impact it's going to have. So what would you say to the person who has a hard time saying no? Like, how would you encourage them to, kind of learn how to do that better, I guess is a good way to say.
I would say first to know that they're not alone, that we all struggle with it. But I would have a list. I'd make a list of your priorities. What are things that, aside from all your mandated things you have to do, what are things that are really important to you? And from there, how do you go about incorporating that into your lifestyle? Yeah. And from there, when things pop up, you can come and go and decide. Some people say, gosh, I don't have time to go to the gym. I don't have time to read my Bible. I don't have time to do this, but it is a priority. Okay, so put it all down, fit it into your week. And from there, when other things come up, is it going to impact these things? Yeah. No. And you want to do it, take it on. Yeah. Is it going to impact it, but only for 2 weeks and it's really important? Okay, take it on. If it's going to impact and take off reading your Bible, or it's going to take off the gym, which could help mental health, physical health, don't do that. Yeah. It's not going to work. Yeah. But make a list of what are your priorities. If you could do it all, what would it be? And space it out. That's what I was really having to do. It was like, okay, spending time with Mark, spending time with Miles, even spending time with my dogs. Yeah. I love dogs. Yeah. And so Yogi and Brew are my fur babies. Yeah. And so, I want to spend time with them. I want to be able to enjoy hanging out with my friends and their children and letting Miles play with other children. Yeah. Yeah. I want to actually stop at the beach and not drive past it every day. Yeah. Those are the things that I really enjoy. I'm like, gosh, the beach brings me such calmness, and I'm never there.
That's right.
No wonder I'm so stressed all the time. Yes. And making those kind of adjustments. Yeah.
And we live in the perfect spot,
And we drive past it on the one all the time.
Yeah. So tell me more about Yogi and Brew. Tell me more about Yogi and Brew. I love that. I love your choice of names. Yogi, yes. I'm assuming Yogi Bear, or but yeah, tell us about Yogi. Give us a picture of who they are.
Okay, so Yogi is my corgi. Okay. He is, in his mind, the alpha of the dog pack. Okay. He is just a fur ball. He's loud, he's rambunctious, but he's fun. Yeah. And then Brew he's an 80-pound dog, but he is the most sensitive dog ever. Your tone and your voice could be enough to make his ears go down, and he's sad. So he's my little troubled soul, but he loves running around and playing. He messes with the corgi all the time.
Oh, sure.
And so we got Brew's name from a few different things. One, we love coffee, and one, we enjoy the occasional craft beer. Yeah. And so together it was like Brew is just the perfect name.
Oh, yeah.
And so, but we do call him Brew Brew, and Miles always says Yogi and Brew Brew. Yeah. So it's kind of a boo-boo thing. Yeah, you could do Yogi and Boo Boo and put those together. Yeah, yeah. But I tried to, Mark and I grew up on all of the, old cartoons, and so we were kind of going through all the different names, and Yogi came, and we're like, done. Yeah. Done. So he's definitely a Yogi.
Well, I'm a dog person too. We also have 2 dogs. We have a 4-year-old Vizsla named Oakley, who sounds very similar to Brew. He's got a very high EQ. Yeah. So he knows, he recognizes, he reads emotions. Then we have a little dog. He's a miniature pinscher. His name is Taz. And we call him Taz because he's like the Tasmanian devil. He could be the most loving creature, but then at the next time he's like, he's all growly and snarly. So we called him Taz. It's a perfect name for him, even though he's about 5 pounds.
It always happens that way.
And he's the dominant dog. Yeah, the young pup. Even though he's 10 times the size, he respects the wise older dog that's only 1/10 of his size. So he submits to him, which is wonderful to see. But as we do on every one of our podcasts, we always kind of wrap up with 2 questions. We love these 2 questions, and the first question is this: what wakes you up in the morning? Like, what brings you great joy, Alexa? Just and it might be Miles, and it might be Yogi and Brew, but really, what excites you? What wakes you up in the morning?
Yeah, we've been doing a lot of work on our house, and so I really just enjoy our little sanctuary that we put together. We just finished our backyard. I love that Miles can play in the backyard. We have our dogs. So I kind of think like, gosh, I get up in the morning, I go to work, so we have money to keep investing into our home and to keep, letting us all go do fun things, and really just kind of keeping, we're trying to keep our world small while he's little, and to really focus on him and just to enjoy that time. And that really is what gets me up. I think the pandemic also made me kind of a homebody, but I just really I really love our little home and how we've kind of tailored it to just who we are. And
I mean, it's your sanctuary, right? It's such a sweet
I
picture.
love being there, and I love being able to just continue to work and to be productive in society in order to keep my little sanctuary going.
Well, so what wakes you up in the morning? What gets you up every day? Conversely, the second question is, what keeps you up at night? What concerns you as you kind of think about, and it could be job related. It could be, what's going on in the world too. But,
I think it really is job related. I've come to another realization that I feel like in my position, my staff serves the community, but really me is I'm trying to serve my staff. And so I try to be, we talked about flexibility and building your own schedules, but also if they need to take time off and they need to go do things for their family, that they feel like they can go do that. They don't have to be worried about asking for time off or any of those needs. But I know that, everybody is, both staff, myself, the people we serve, they all have things that we're going through. And, we all share stuff about what's going on in our lives. And I've just been really conscientious about just like all the things that the enemy just tries to do to make you think that I can't do anymore, I'm not good enough, and seeing all these people come in and housing is so difficult for them, and there's all these barriers that they're facing, and there's some things that are downright unjust, and we don't know how to go about overcoming that with the resources we have. And so just seeing that the housing struggles and how people are really out at difficult times in their lives, trying to figure out how do we go about, taking care of the trauma that we have. The longer you're homeless, the more mental health and the more just barriers and bad things, we'll put it that way, can affect you. And so I sit in bed just thinking about like, what could we do to be more effective? How do we get more people into housing? How do we get less people leaving our program, remaining homeless? How do we get more resources into the community? And it keeps me up because it can't be just me. There's so many moving pieces, and you'd have to have all these pieces cooperating in the same way that it almost feels impossible. And then on top of that, you just have all the stuff that going on within your own life, within your staff's life, within even partnering agencies. Sometimes we share, and you could just tell that there's a lot at force trying to prevent you from doing what you can, and trying to say like, nah, you're not good enough, you're not going to be able to achieve those goals, there's no point in doing it, it's never been done, you guys have tried this in the past, it'll never work. And there's that constant just back and forth at night, not knowing what the next steps will always be.
Well, I know Jesus in Matthew 5 said, we're called to be salt and light. So you are being salt and you are being light in a community and in a career field that needs to know the presence of Jesus and needs to see come to know the God that loves him. And so God's using it in a powerful way. And so as you just shared, one of the ways I was thinking that people could, really partner with you is to be praying for you. Praying for you, Alexa, and for your team and for your mission. I know a lot of people have questions, and a lot of people, maybe even today as they watch this podcast, I'm thinking might even want to ask more and learn more. And so if they were to go to you reach out, where should we send them, or where would you encourage them to go if they said, hey, I'd like to help. What can I do to help? Where could we send them?
So the best way would probably be to give us a call.
Okay.
So I don't know. I could give the phone number really quickly.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
So it's an 831-424-9186.
Okay.
I'm extension 170, so you can just call directly to me. But I really want to, encourage people to think about, even if they have a room that they are willing to rent.
Oh, yes.
If they have, some people call it a mother-in-law suite, or some call it a granny unit, some call it an ADU. But if you have kind of a separated unit that, you're blessed with, but you kind of use it as, a fun room or a guest room, and you're willing to try a 6-month lease with somebody or give it a shot, I would really encourage people to think about that. And just think about within their own limitations what they can do, if that's something that God would call them towards. Because I think there's a lot of room for some creative housing.
Yeah.
But it does take, it's kind of some change of mindset of what a housing looks like.
Right.
And,
right.
In all other ways, if they're thinking of volunteering or they'd love to donate, I will never say no to donations. Yeah. Please feel free to give a call, come speak to me, and I'd love to find a way to get them connected. Right. We never turn down help.
Yeah. That's at the Housing Resource Center. And
yes.
If people have watched the podcast and if the Lord inspires them and leads them and just to reach out, but also we'll be praying. And that's actually what we're going to do right now, Alexa. We're going to close and prayer and just, Alexa, thank you again for joining us on the podcast. You've been such a blessing to our guests and those who are watching and listening all around the world. We love to learn about how God is raising up leaders and how God is using those leaders in different environments and different forums. And so let's pray.
Yes,
Lord, we do thank you for this time, and we thank you for Alexa. Lord, as she shared her story, we thank you that she was willing to come on the podcast today and just to share her story, to share her journey, and also to share, Lord, what you are doing in and through her as she leads this wonderful team at the Housing Resource Center. And so, Lord, we want to pray for your hand of blessing over Alexa, over her family, as she continues to navigate the challenges and the joys of being an executive director, of being a wife, and of being a mother, Lord, and that she is figuring out what that life balance looks like, Lord. We pray that you continue to give her fresh insights and continue to help her build that team and help her to accomplish the mission that you've called her to do. And so, Lord, we love you. We thank you again for this time we've had on our podcast, and we just say thank you, Jesus. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much.